Welcome to Scandal Water,
where we cover the stories that have captivated the entertainment world.
I'm Candy, a longtime educator and community theater actress.
And I'm Ashley, a writer and co-founder of a local theater group.
We're two friends who share a love of entertainment.
From true crime docuseries to blockbuster movies to classic TV to Broadway shows and everything in between.
Each week, I share a compelling story related to pop culture.
And I chime in using my trivia junkie brain.
We stick to the facts until it's time to settle into our armchairs at the end.
Then we're simply two women with a strong cup of tea and even stronger opinions.
We're Scandal Water.
And if this sounds like your cup of tea,
follow the show on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Ashley.
hello.
We're back to talk about one of your favorite topics today.
Yes.
Yes, our theme is O Canada, and what are we talking about today, Ashley?
Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables. I'm going to tell you, I came into this one knowing nothing.
As much as you knew about trolls?
more so than that, because at least I've heard of Anne of Green Gables many times. But
I can't believe you were in you were a literacy coach and you hadn't had
read
any.
it.
No, that's
I
wild
missed
to
it.
me.
I missed it. I mean, I've heard of it, of course, and I'd heard of the author's name, but I just had never read it, and I just didn't know much about it.
Fascinating.
But not so anymore.
That's right. You are now
so
primo
anymore.
authority on
That's
Miss
right.
Anne.
I've got lots to share now. No, but anyway, to start with, I was going to let you know, I thought this was interesting. I found a 2025 article published on the IGN website that listed the 25 best-selling works of literary fiction of all time. And would you believe it? Anne made the list.
Absolutely, I would believe it.
Anne of Green Gables came in at 25. I thought that is pretty impressive.
That is really impressive.
Because I know we both like a list.
I do love a list.
Would you like to hear the complete
I
list
would.
of the top 25? Now remember, this is only literary fiction.
In Canada?
No.
Okay.
It's kind of worldwide. So
All
there
right.
will be a few titles. If you're
Okay.
like me, there'll be a few titles you won't recognize
Okay.
because these are works that sold extremely well in other countries outside the U.S.
So this is the top 25 literary works,
literary fiction.
literary fiction that has sold ever.
Best-selling. Yes.
For as of right now.
It was published in 2025.
As of 2025.
Okay.
Got it.
Starting from 25, Anne of Green Gables. 24, Heidi. 23, Lolita. 22, 100 Years of Solitude. 21, Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. 20, The Bridges of Madison County.
Oh.
19, The Catcher in the Rye. 18, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows.
Oh, I'm surprised he's that. I'm betting all the Harry Potters are on here.
I would not bet against you. Listen to this.
Okay.
I think I just read 18.
You did, yeah.
17, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah.
16, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. 15, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. 14, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. All right?
Oh, wow.
13, The Alchemist. 12, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. 11, The Da Vinci Code. 10, Vardi Wala Gunda. Never heard of that one before.
I haven't heard of that one or the 1,000 Years of Solitude. Those
I
two
didn't
so
know
far
those.
I haven't
Yeah.
heard of.
Number 9, She, A History of Adventure. I don't know that one either.
That one either.
8, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes.
7, The Hobbit.
Yes.
6, Dream of the Red Chamber.
Not heard of that one.
Nope. 5, And Then There Were None.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Agatha, you made the list. You're top 5, sister.
Number 4, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Oh, my gosh.
Number 3, The Little Prince.
Aw.
Number 2, A Tale of Two Cities.
Oh.
And number 1, Don Quixote.
Really?
Yes.
Don Quixote. Look at you go.
This is so
Chase
interesting.
those
I know.
windmills.
I know. But of course, we're talking about Anne of Green
Anne of
Gables
Green Gables.
today.
It makes my heart warm.
Well, in a second, I'm going to ask you to tell me why you love it so much. But for right now, let's just give a little context. Anne of Green Gables was published in 1908.
Wow.
It was the first book in a series of 8 books that spans from the time the title character, Anne Shirley, is 11, all the way up through where she is a
She's
mother of adult
right
children in
there.
her 50s.
Look right there.
Oh,
There they are.
There they are. But of course, we're going to focus primarily on that first book and how the author, Lucy Maud Montgomery, came to write the story of spunky and smart Anne Shirley. And just a little more than that, because let me share this with you. Here's a part of a summary I found on Amazon. When Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert send for an orphan boy to help with their Prince Edward Island farm, they're shocked when a talkative red-headed girl named Anne Shirley arrives instead.
With an E.
That's right. Anne, with her vivid imagination and romantic nature, wasn't what they expected, but her irrepressible spirit quickly wins their hearts. After a childhood in strangers' homes and orphanages, Anne finally has a real home at Green Gables, where she renames the landscape around her and transforms ordinary moments into magic.
Yes.
But Anne's spirited nature also leads to mishaps.
Of course it does. She's so reckless.
Well, of course, the summary reminds us of our connection to the theme because it does take place Prince Edward Island, which is the smallest province in Canada. I looked it up because I don't know much about Canada, I'll be honest with you, but it's reported to be a beautiful area nicknamed the Garden of the Gulf. Now, why did I love
this
topic?
Oh,
Ashley?
I love Anne so much. I don't think that I'm anything like Anne, but she's someone that you would want to be like. You know, she's a character in fiction that you would love to be like. She wanted to be a writer, so I identified with that. She had a vivid imagination, but I was not as... I was a rule follower. So I was probably more like Diana, her bosom buddy, than I was an Anne. But you wanted to be Anne, you know? And the love that Matthew and Anne experience, that paternal love and her romance with Gilbert. And then the miniseries that came out with Megan Follows.
Yes.
It just was this whole quaint, beautiful world that you wished you could live in.
Yeah.
I love her.
Well, here's the thing. I felt like I could not do justice to this episode without becoming a little more familiar. Plus, remember, I set a goal to do more reading.
You did? Did you read
I listened to a fantastic audio recording of it. There was an audiobook I found. The version was great. The narrator was great. And I listened to the entire book. I made it. Yes, I made it. I really enjoyed it. I really did. I did. I fell in love with little Anne Shirley, I will say. And then I did not have time to watch the miniseries that you recommended. However, I found a 30-minute YouTube feature on the making of that 1985 series, Anne of Green Gables, starring, as you said, Megan Follows, along with Colleen Dewhurst and Richard Farnsworth. The director, by the way, was Kevin Sullivan, and he narrated a lot of that little feature that I saw. But it gave me a real glimpse into it because I saw lots of little interviews with the people involved, as well as clips from that series. So that was fun. I feel like I'm a little caught up, even though, of course, you're the expert, and you probably read the whole series. Am I right?
Yes, I did, but it's been decades since I have entered Anne's world. But I just loved the miniseries. That was childhood. You know how like Little House on the Prairie and Anne of Green Gables. That's what you grew up with. What I grew up with.
And Megan Follows did such a good job.
She's fantastic. I know they redid it on Netflix. I never did watch it, but I'm sure it was good. People said that it was a very good. It was different than the books. They kind of did grittier and darker. And I'm like, I don't want adaptation. I don't want my Anne to be gritty and dark. I want her to be what she's supposed to be from the book, which is light.
You wanted kind of a really true following of the original. Yeah. All right. Well, as we move into this episode, I wanted to share this quote from the Anne of Green Gables website. You'll see why it's struck me in just a second. Quote, in a journal entry from 1892, Montgomery wrote, elderly couple apply to orphan asylum for a boy. By mistake, a girl is sent them. This was a reference to distant relations of hers, meaning Lucy Maud Montgomery, who were trying to adopt a boy and ended up with a girl by mistake. And like Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert would in the novel, her relations ended up keeping the girl. She was quoted as saying that this was the only parallel from her own life and that of her literary heroine. But reading through the 8 Anne of Green Gables novels, it is not hard to see that this is not the case. That caused me to slant the episode differently.
Oh, interesting. So we're going to kind of talk about Lucy?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought I was going into this thinking it's just going to be about Anne of Green Gables. Yeah. And all of a sudden I was like, how much of this
is Lucy?
Is connected? How much of this is Lucy? So that's the slant this episode is going to take. But knowing that you have such a history with Anne of Green Gables, as we're going through this, you chime in all the time when you see connections or when you have thoughts or when you want to bring up something that you know, because I know that this is something that touches your heart.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. All right.
It doesn't just touch my heart. It fully embraces it. It's a hug.
And I also loved, by the way, that quote told us where she got the idea for the story. Yeah, I loved that. Following back up on that idea, though, remember it said that she was quoted as saying she only had that one parallel to her own life.
Right.
But I found a reference to that quote in a Smithsonian Magazine article where it says, quote, "People were never right in saying I was Anne," she, meaning Lucy Maud Montgomery, told a fellow writer, Ephraim Weber, in a 1921 letter. "But in some respects, they will be right if they write me down as Emily." She was referring to Emily of the New Moon, a later novel, the first in a series about the difficulty of making it as a young female writer.
I've got those as well.
Have you read those?
I don't remember if I have or not. They look like they've been read, but I don't remember.
To kind of flesh this out, she maintained, Lucy Maud Montgomery maintained, that Emily was her most autobiographical character. And she actually said that that was the book that she wrote that pleased her the most.
Oh.
When she finished it, she said, even including
Anne of Green Gables.
Anne of Green Gables.
You know, the book that probably is my absolute favorite of Lucy's is The Blue Castle.
I have not read that. What's that one about?
Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, goodness. It's about a woman who's in her upper 20s. She's still living with her very difficult family. She gets a diagnosis of a heart issue. And so she just decides to, it's kind of like what we've seen in other movies where someone gets a diagnosis and they're like, you know what, I'm going to live life the way that I want to live it.
To the fullest.
To the fullest. And she shocks her whole family, you know, just different things that she does. It's just a beautiful story.
Oh, nice.
I love it.
Nice. Well, it was just so interesting to me because I'm finding all these quotes. And that was the thing I loved, by the way. I saw so many because we're going to hear Lucy Maud Montgomery was such a prolific writer, not just of books and stories and poems and essays, but also journaling. I mean, she wrote down so many of her thoughts. So I got to see so many of her actual thoughts and comments as I was doing this. And it just struck me as being so interesting that she connected, and she would admit that she connected to this Emily character. And we can see why. But she said she wasn't Anne. And yet, doing the research,
You think she was a little bit?
I saw some Anne. So I'm going to, as we go through here, we'll see what you think.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead then and start at the beginning. So Lucy Maud Montgomery was born in Clifton, now New London, Prince Edward Island, Canada, on November 30th of 1874 to Hugh John Montgomery and Clara Woolner McNeil. Do you know anything about her background? Let me start.
No, I do not.
Okay.
You know, I take that back. I may have heard History Chicks. They may have covered her at one point.
I think they did.
But I don't remember.
Okay.
So,
well, good,
Yeah.
because I think you're
I'm
going to
gonna love
find
it.
some of this really interesting.
Okay.
All right. Sadly, according to a Canadian Geographic article, the earliest memory she could recall was seeing her mother lying in a coffin, dead from tuberculosis, when Maud was only 21 months old. At one point, she wrote in her journal that, quote, "I did not feel any sorrow, for I knew nothing of what it all meant. I was only vaguely troubled. Why was mother so still? And why was father crying? I reached down and laid my baby hand against mother's cheek."
wow.
I know. Now, by the way, Maud is the name that she went by.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to call her Maud
Okay.
throughout this, all right? Maud's father decided to turn his baby's care over to the mother's parents, Clara's parents. So basically, the maternal grandparents are the
Took her
ones
in.
who took her in.
Okay.
Alexander and Lucy Woolner McNeil of Cavendish, which is right there on Prince Edward Island. Although the father did stay on the island and would occasionally drop by, but it was sporadic.
Man.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
did you say she had siblings? I don't remember.
No.
Okay, so she's the only child.
Only child, and this is when she's very, very young. Well, by the time Maud was 6 or 7, her father had moved away to eventually
man.
settle in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and then he remarried.
So he's just like, bye.
Absolutely. And that's
Man.
something that was mentioned, her feelings of abandonment.
Yeah,
by
well,
her
there's an
father.
Anne
Absolutely.
Parallel right there.
Okay, so what did this mean to her? Well, it meant that she was living with her grandmother,
Elderly.
elderly grandmother. Both grandparents were in their 50s. The grandmother's name was also Lucy.
I heard you say that, so that must
and
be why
that's
she went by
why
Maud.
she became Maud.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I don't know that it was her choice. I
Oh.
think grandma was Lucy, and therefore it was like the toddler who's come into the family is just Maud. And so that's an interesting thing. But it also, as we've said, means she's living with an elderly couple in their 50s.
Well, that's not elderly now. It would have been
Well,
elderly
true.
then.
Back
Yeah.
at that point, they did call them that, who were very rigid in their ways, very conservative, and not at all affectionate.
Well, there's Marilla. That's Marilla.
And it gets, okay, here we go. Here's a quote from a 1905 journal entry that Maud wrote where she commented about her grandparents. Grandfather McNeil, in all the years I knew him, was a stern, domineering, irritable man. Grandmother was kind to me, quote, in her own way.
Okay.
Her, quote, way was very often torture to me, and I was constantly reproached with ingratitude and wickedness.
Man.
The Canadian Geographic article commented that Maud believed for years that her grandfather didn't like her. And it went on to say, quote, with legal personhood for women still decades away, both grandparents believed children should be seen and not heard, and that women belonged in the home. When Montgomery's grandfather entered the room, both wife and granddaughter were expected to remain silent.
Oh, man.
Can you imagine living
No.
in a house like that?
That'd be terrible.
Yeah, not easy living with those grandparents. They did not show Maud the same kind of love and care that Matthew and Marilla showed Anne Shirley in the novels, clearly. Fortunately, though, there were several things that made life much more enjoyable for Maud when she was experiencing these things. One happy place for her was the home of her Uncle John and Aunt Annie Campbell. Now, Annie was sister to Maud's mother, Clara. So
Okay. It's all still maternal family.
Yes, absolutely. So it sounds as though both of them very loving toward Maud, and she loved spending time at their place, their farm, which was called Silverbush. That was the Campbell farm. She later referred to that home as the Wonder Castle of my childhood.
Oh.
Yeah, a huge part of it was the fun she had playing with her cousins and the welcome, feeling in the home. But Maud also just really liked the house itself. In one journal entry, she said, I have always liked its arrangement better than that of any other house I have ever known. I only wish I could have a house of my own like it, and I would be satisfied. It also had a pond on the property of Silverbush that inspired the Lake of Shining Waters that we hear about in Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
Here's a sweet little side note. That house, since 1972, has operated as the Anne of Green Gables Museum.
Oh, that's
And it's
great.
still run by some descendants of
That's
the family.
great.
Yeah. Other meaningful things, though, that helped make Maud's life more pleasant was her love of nature and her imagination,
Yeah, you got to escape to both of those things when you have that kind of upbringing.
and her love of reading and writing.
All escapes.
And so I'm seeing the parallels again,
Yes, me
right?
too.
I mean, isn't this Anne Shirley?
Yes.
Yes. The nature, that's something that came up in her journals a lot, but I'm moving to the imagination. One example of that, a CBC article shared that Maud had two imaginary friends growing up. She named them Katie Maurice and Lucy Gray, and these imaginary friends lived in a fairy room behind a bookcase in her grandparents' sitting room. And, of course, her imagination also came out when she was playing and also when she was reading and writing. This is an excerpt from a diary entry that Maud wrote in 1889 when she was 14, where she mentions her writing. Quote, I am going to begin a new kind of diary. I have kept one of a kind for years, ever since I was a tot of 9. But I burned it today. I'm going to start all over anew and write only when I have something worth writing about.
I wish we could have kept those early things, you
I know, but like her voice, does she not even sound?
She does sound like Anne.
Yes. Several sources mention that Maud not only recorded her thoughts and events from life, but she also wrote stories, poems, all of these things. Her first poem was published in a Prince Edward Island newspaper when she was either 15 or 16, depending on the source.
Good
But she
job.
was young. Yes, absolutely. It was actually also around that same time period that Maud tried living with her father for a brief time.
How'd that go?
Not great.
Not great.
Yeah.
I bet he did that. The whole, like, seeing her reminded him of the death of his wife, and he just couldn't see her without, serious therapy kind of thing. Like, Dad needed to separate the two.
Maybe so.
I mean, that's
I
just
can't
me.
help judging him.
I know. Yeah,
It
we're
makes
gonna.
me sad for
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
Yeah. Because what happened was, of course, he's now living with a new wife. And
New
He has
family.
a new family. He's in Prince Albert. And the way it sounded was that it was very strained between her and her stepmother, and that she was basically just expected to help take care of the new kids.
The babysitter.
And I'm not sure she even made it a year, but she decided she
What a
wanted to go
shame.
back. I know. So disappointing.
She wants to go back to the unloving grandparents. That's a thing.
Right. Well, another interesting note from Maud's teen years, she did attend a one-room schoolhouse near her grandparents' home in Cavendish. And according to that same Canadian Geographic article, quote, Montgomery may have found inspiration for Gilbert Blythe, Anne's academic rival turned sweetheart, in her real-life schoolmate, Nate Lockhart.
Oh,
the
Nate
cleverest
Lockhart.
The cleverest boy in her Cavendish PEI grade school, Prince Edward Island.
Prince Edward Island, yeah.
Alongside their friendly rivalry, they passed notes, walked together along Lover's Lane. They did have a little path they called Lover's Lane, and gave each other nicknames. The year she turned 15, Lockhart wrote Montgomery a letter bravely declaring his love.
No.
Montgomery avoided him from then on. And when she got word he'd said her fair intellect meant she might attain some success in the world of letters, she never forgave him for the slight.
That sounds like Anne, too.
It does. She was so offended over one thing and would never forgive it.
Never forgive him.
So, of course, schooling did not work the same way then that it does now. Maud did finish her 10th grade year of high school in 1893. And then the following year, 1893 to 1894, she studied for a teacher's license at Prince of Wales College. She completed the 2-year course in 1 year. She graduated with honors, and she was ready to teach.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Absolutely. The Lucy Maud Montgomery website, I think it is listed as L.M. Montgomery, shared an overview of what happened in Maud's life over the next few decades. I'm going to hit a few of these highlights very quickly. She did teach at 3 different one-room schoolhouses in Prince Edward Island over the course of a few years, so it was very brief. But then she left teaching for 1 year, which was 1895 to 96, to study some courses in English literature at a university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, becoming, this is how they phrased it, becoming one of the few women of her time to seek higher education.
Nice.
So she was always pushing those boundaries. Women at this time had not so much respect, not so many rights, right? But it was during her time doing this that she received her first payments for her writing.
Oh, what a feeling.
I know. She was so excited. In 1898, while she was teaching again, her grandfather, McNeil, died suddenly.
Oh.
Again, I see a parallel, right?
Yeah.
Because...
Spoiler.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, it is 1800s, 1900s. It's okay to spoil this, but man, what a crushing.
It was.
Ooh, how did you feel when it happened in the book?
It was so sad.
Yeah.
I hated it. And I didn't actually include this in my notes, but I had a mental note about this. She, at one point, said that she took a lot of flack.
Really?
From her readers over let's just say it.
Yeah.
Matthew dies.
Yeah,
Matthew dies. Suddenly, tragically. And she actually said she wished she hadn't done it.
Really?
She regretted it. She wished she'd let him live longer. But I think she was modeling. I think she pulled a lot from her life.
I think she did too. Although Matthew would have been the way she wanted her grandfather to be.
And that's a point I think we should come back to.
Okay.
Was she writing her life the way she wished it had been?
Man, what a sad thought.
I know, but was that what was
happening?
It could be. Okay, well, after her grandfather passed, she returned to Cavendish to help take care of her grandmother, who otherwise would have had to leave the home.
Right.
Okay. She remained with her grandmother until she passed, which was about 13 years later, except for one little chunk of time. It wasn't even a full year, 1901 to 1902, when she worked as a proofreader for the Daily Echo in Halifax. The rest of the time, she was there.
Wow.
Now, while she was in Cavendish, though, Maud was writing. In addition to caretaking, she was writing with an eye toward publication. She got plenty of rejection notices, but she also started publishing an impressive amount of works, especially considering, I want to keep coming back to this point, it was very difficult for women at this time to get things published, to make it as writers. In fact, that's one of the reasons why she would go by L.M. Montgomery.
Of course, because you can't tell the gender.
You can't tell her. Yeah, exactly. So...
You know, they still say that today for women writers.
Yeah, S.E. Hinton, who wrote The Outsiders. Now, that was in the 1960s, but that's why she used S.E. instead of Susan Eloise. Yeah.
J.K. Rowling.
Yep. Well, according to the same website I mentioned a minute ago, in 1899, Maud earned $96.88 for her writing.
Get it, Maud.
Well, it was a pretty big amount at that time.
I would love $96 right now for writing. I'd be like, yeah. I mean, you know, for
the achievement.
Yeah, a publication, a magazine or something saying, here you go. Here's a royalty.
But that actually was a pretty good sum,
yeah,
too.
It is.
And she became pretty prolific with her writing, and the number of pieces that she published increased dramatically. By 1903, the earnings from her writing increased to $500.
Yes.
Which, according to that Canadian Geographic article, was as much as a well-paid male professional writer might have earned at that time. So, in 1905, she finished her first and what would end up being her most famous novel, Anne of Green Gables. We've already mentioned the seed idea that sparked the premise behind the story, those distant relatives who wanted to adopt a boy and were given an orphan girl by mistake. But an article about Maud on the Parks Canada website commented that some of the other incidents in the book were also inspired by real life. Here's a quote from them. When Anne puts liniment instead of vanilla into a cake she's baking, L.M. Montgomery was remembering the following occasion. Her landlady at one of the homes where she boarded while teaching mistakenly flavored, she has that word in quotation marks, a cake with liniment, and the gentleman to whom it was served enjoyed it greatly.
Okay.
And Maud reportedly, this is not a quote, Maud reportedly gleaned some inspiration for Anne's appearance from a famous model of that time period, a woman named Evelyn Nesbit.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You've heard of her, right?
I have, yes.
Yes. I think she's come up for us at some point
I
before.
believe so, too.
Right. There were other examples as well, but just to kind of bring out some of the acclaim, you know, we know that today that novel is still beloved and all the acclaim that has come its way. Two different sources said that after its publication, Mark Twain wrote a letter to Maud praising the book and calling Anne the most lovable childhood heroine since the immortal Alice.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, I would frame that. That would go right up on my wall.
Right? But you'll be so shocked to hear this. Despite us knowing how great that book was and would end up being, it did not get published right away.
What?
Yeah. Same pattern that we've seen with so many other notable authors. Maud could not find someone who would publish her book.
Man.
She received rejections from everybody she
Don't
approached.
you want to be a time traveler and go back and go to that first person? Do you understand what you got right here?
I guarantee that we don't have to be a time traveler.
No.
That person
No.
kicked themselves
Yes.
for years
Yes.
afterwards. Yes. But after receiving rejections from every publisher she contacted, Maud just tucked that book in a hat box.
No, Maud.
And put it out of her mind.
No.
1907, 2 years later, she found the manuscript again, reread it, and
Said,
decided
you know what? This is good.
She did. And she was like, I'm going to try again. This time, she was successful. Anne of Green Gables was published in 1908 by the L.C. Page Company of Boston and became an immediate bestseller. In fact, Wikipedia says, quote, Anne of Green Gables was published in June 1908 and by November 1909 had gone through 6 printings.
Wow.
A sequel was published the following year.
Right, it was.
Yeah. Now,
Anne of Avonlea.
And as we know, Maud would eventually end up writing 6 more books in the series. In a 2023 Smithsonian article, a journalist named Vanessa Braganza offered this comment that I found insightful. Anne finds not only a home, but kindred spirits who fall under the spell of her gift for seeing beauty and possibility in the world. In the Anne novels, the emotional complexity of Montgomery's art lies in the way that adult characters who are hardened in some way, the stern Marilla, Anne's adoptive mother, or the rigid widow Aunt Josephine Barry, become more compassionate human beings under Anne's influence. Montgomery's perceptive insights into such relations became her trademark.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would, yes.
Well, we've gotten to the point to where her famous book has been published.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and take a break
Okay.
there. When we come back, more about her career, but we're also going to start delving into her personal life.
Oh.
Ooh, a little romance.
There's not much we love more than spilling the tea with you every Tuesday. So, we've decided to occasionally take a moment to thank a few of our supporters who help make this possible.
Along with the fun, producing a weekly podcast also brings with it more time and expense than you might expect. Your financial generosity in becoming a member through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon, both of which can be found on our website or social media accounts, allows us to keep creating these episodes.
We'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to one of our current members, Jill M. As a thank you, Jill and anyone else who becomes a Scandal Water supporter will receive perks like discounts on merch and access to exclusive bonus content, such as our minisodes.
If you'd like to hear your name on that roster, become a member using one of the links on social media or on our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com.
Until then, we lift our cup to you, Jill.
Cheers! And we are back. So let's talk some romance.
I love some romance talk.
Yeah. So over the years, Maud had had several suitors and even some marriage proposals. But in 1906, she had become secretly engaged to a reverend named Ewan MacDonald. And 4 months after Maud's grandmother died, which was in 1911, the couple got married in the house that she loved so much, Silverbush, which again was that farm owned by her aunt and uncle, the Campbells. Now, this is just kind of interesting because she's a little older. She's in her 30s here. All of this is happening, like her big success is happening when she's kind of in her low 30s. Now, after their marriage, Maud and Ewan moved to Leaksdale, Ontario, where he was minister in a Presbyterian church. And then the two went on to have 3 sons. Chester was born in 1912. And then sadly, they had a son, Hugh, who was stillborn in 1914. And then their final son, Stuart, made his appearance in 1915.
Okay.
Maud loved being a mother. And that, of course, took up a big chunk of her time, as well as fulfilling the duties of a reverend's wife. And she also spent a great deal of time writing.
I'm glad she didn't give that up.
She wrote things by hand.
Wow.
She would write by hand, and she would find the time throughout her day to write. And this woman was churning out the works. Best-selling novels, a slew of short stories, poems,
That
essays.
is so
She was
admirable.
doing it all. A few of the popular works that she wrote outside of the Anne of Green Gables series included what we've already mentioned, Emily of New Moon, Jane of Lantern Hill, Pat of Silverbush. You've mentioned The Blue Castle, and another one was The Story Girl.
Okay.
Okay. But I feel like I would be remiss if I did not at least quickly run through the names of the books in the Anne of Green Gables series.
Yes.
With the years they were published.
Okay.
Now, what you're going to notice is 2 of the dates are going to be
Really close together.
Well, actually, they're going to be really out of sorts because what happened was she wrote Anne's life kind of through this series of 5 follow-up books and then came back later and decided to fill in some gap years with 2 books that came much later.
Okay.
Okay. So in the series, if you're putting them in order of Anne's life,
Okay.
number 1 is Anne of Green Gables, came out in 1908. Number 2 is Anne of Avonlea, published in 1909. Number 3, Anne of the Island, published in 1915. Here's one that's out of order in terms of the time that she wrote it. Anne of Windy Poplars was published in 1936.
Oh, that is
Okay.
a big difference. Okay.
Now, number 5, Anne's House of Dreams was published in 1917. And then another fill-in, Anne of Ingleside, which was published in 1939.
Wow.
7 was Rainbow Valley, published in 1919. And then the final one, Rilla of Ingleside, was published in 1921. So basically, as we said, you follow Anne from this girl of 11 down to where she's this mother. And the Rilla of Ingleside is about her daughter, right? But then she came back in the 30s and she was like,
filled in.
let me go back and I'm going to fill in the time where Anne Shirley had left Redmond College and she gets this new job and she's starting her new life away from Green Gables, and that became her Anne of Windy Poplars.
Okay.
And then her other fill-in was Anne of Ingleside, where she came back in 1939, and she's talking about Anne as this mother of 5 children with a new baby on the way, and this insufferable Aunt Mary Maria who's coming to visit, and you know, she's kind of filling in her life as this mother who's worried that maybe Gilbert doesn't love her anymore.
No, he does. I can promise you, Anne, he loves you more than anything.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the complete picture.
Okay.
All right. Now, I'm stepping back and I'm just kind of talking big picture now.
Okay.
Because we've got, sadly, some surprises coming, I think, but they're not happy ones. Okay. Good news, though. She was incredibly successful as a writer. She was honored with several prestigious awards in recognition of her talents. For example, Maud was the first Canadian woman to become a member of the British Royal Society of Arts.
Nice.
That occurred in 1923. She was awarded Officer of the Order of the British Empire in 1935. And in 1943, Lucy Maud Montgomery was designated as a National Historic Person.
Wow, I didn't know you could even do that. A National
I'm
Historic
telling ya.
Landmark? She's a National Historic Person.
Canada's like, we are proud of you.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yes. And of course, her success also ensured that she and her family were in great shape financially.
Yeah.
But here's the sad part that I just alluded to. Sounds like life would be perfect for this woman. Things were not exactly as they appeared. Okay, so one of the things that was ongoing that was so difficult for Maud was her husband suffered from mental illness.
Oh, no.
Now, I don't know that they knew how to label it at that
Yeah.
time. Some sources said that they were calling it religious melancholy or melancholia. Yes, that was a term that I saw. This was not something I was able to corroborate, but one source said, quote, after the First World War, MacDonald received an official diagnosis of manic depressive insanity
Oh, my.
from a doctor in Boston.
Did he serve in the war?
I don't believe he served in the war. I think it was all of this,
All
the
the
situation
tragedy
around
happening?
it.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
everything that, yes. That quote, which by the way was from that Canadian Geographic article, it goes on to say, since any form of mental illness was considered a shameful secret, writes Liz Rosenberg in House of Dreams, The Life of L.M. Montgomery, Maud carefully hid the truth of her husband's condition. She wrote the sermons he read in church.
goodness.
And when he couldn't, she'd lie and say he was out of town.
Wow.
So that's coming from one source,
Yeah.
you know. But I did see numerous sources that talked about how much he struggled and how difficult this was on Maud. It was already challenging for her. She had talked about in some of her journal entries that it was lonely being a minister's wife, that everybody was so kind to her, she said, and she interacted well with them, but it sounded
She's
as
living a
though-
secret life.
Yes, she was hiding this from them. She was afraid. I think it sounded like she was kind of like an introvert, because I think even putting her husband's condition aside, I think it was hard for her sometimes to open up to people. She kind of like acted as the hostess. And
Well, just think of her upbringing. She was supposed to be seen and not heard. She's not supposed to talk about any of this.
yeah, but she basically said it was lonely, and she didn't really let anyone get close to her. And then, of course, as we've said, but trying to navigate and support her husband through his mental illness added a whole new layer of stress and challenge for her. And as a very sensitive and intelligent woman, the other difficulties of life weighed heavily on her. So let me just share a few other things that she was going through. One thorn in Maud's side for many years was a legal battle that she had to wage with her original publisher, L.C. Page and Company. She discovered at one point they were trying to cheat her.
Oh, no.
Yep. Several ways they were trying to do this. One of those ways was withholding royalties. And so she not only moved to a different company, she also sued them. Maud wrote to a friend at one point about this. And in that letter she wrote about the publisher, quote, he did no end of crooked things because he knew most women would submit to anything rather than go to law. But I come of a different breed of cats.
Yeah.
You go, girl.
Yeah.
Right? So she had to fight that for a few years. She finally won. And then, of course, it went right into appeals and
Yeah.
countersuits.
Yeah.
Ultimately, she did win again. But it was years of legal battles, expense, and, of course, the headache of going through this. Now, on a family level, not that this was a huge pressing daily thing, but I think it's an interesting thing that I should mention. Maud had another aunt on her mother's side, her Aunt Emily, who was reportedly a really sour woman.
Oh, no. Why does Maud have such terrible family members?
I know. And she was never kind to Maud, even when Maud was a child. But it sounds as though she was especially critical and kind of nasty after Maud started achieving success as a writer.
Jealous.
Exactly. Some of the family members said that this woman probably had secret aspirations of being a writer herself. They definitely thought it was jealousy. But they are pretty sure, this came out in several sources, that Maud actually based mean Aunt Elizabeth from the Emily of New Moon series on
her.
this woman. So this is not fun. When she's around
Yeah.
her family, it's not fun to have that to
No.
deal with. But even worse than this, Maud wrote in her journal about how deeply she was affected by the death of her son,
Yeah.
Hugh.
Yeah.
She wrote about the horrors of World War I,
Yeah.
where she was afraid for her sons and just,
Yeah.
you know, like life in general. She lost a cousin who was a beloved, dear friend to her. I think that, if I recall correctly, don't hold me to this, but I think that was the Spanish flu. So she had all these tragedies in her life. And towards the end of her life, Maud was very, very concerned about her son Chester, who she wrote in one journal entry or letter, I can't recall, that his life was a mess. He was having a lot of family issues. His marriage was, he just had a lot going on. So she was very concerned about him. She was also very concerned about the possibility of her son Stuart being drafted into World War II.
Yeah.
So, what I've not yet said is that sources also agree that Maud herself dealt with mental illness.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Right.
Look at all the stuff she's suffering through.
Absolutely. Many sources they called
Depression?
They called it severe bouts of depression.
Yeah.
Some would call it anxiety. There was one source that said, quote, Montgomery was long prone to moods she dubbed 3 o'clock in the mornings. For the anxiety-filled middle of the night hours, she'd spend pacing with clenched fists.
If she
know.
didn't, I would be
I
surprised.
know. So again, it sounds like she had everything, but she had a hard life.
Yeah.
So her husband Ewan ended up resigning from the ministry in 1935, after which the couple moved to Toronto, Ontario to be closer to their sons. And Maud passed away on April 24th of 1942 at the age of 67, and then was buried on the island she loved so much in the Cavendish Cemetery, close to the site of her old home. Ewan made it about 18 more months before he passed away at the age of 73, and he was buried beside his wife. Now, that's sad enough, but it...
No, your
No,
face.
I
What?
know. In 2008, which was the 100th anniversary of the publication of Anne of Green Gables, Maud's granddaughter, Kate MacDonald Butler, revealed in an article published in the Globe and Mail her family's long-held belief that Maud had suffered deeply from depression in those last years and that she'd actually taken her own life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
By the way, this granddaughter, Kate MacDonald Butler, she's very, very involved in with the family. In fact, she's president, or at least as of 2024, she was a president and a leading manager of the heirs of L.M. Montgomery Incorporated.
Okay.
So she's somebody very, very involved with that whole legacy. But she said that only a few hours after sending one final Anne manuscript to her publisher, Maud died of a drug overdose on barbiturates. And by the way, most sources seem to agree that Maud had developed a dependency on barbiturates. Yeah. So Kate reflected in a later interview, quote, "People were shocked. I never regretted publishing that information. I hope somebody read it and thought, Lucy Maud Montgomery was suffering, and so am I." And that's an important point to bring out. The reason why they decided to do this was they wanted to try to destigmatize struggling with mental illness, and that, you know, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to seek help, because at the time that she was going through this,
it is not helping.
Yeah, people, like they said, people didn't want to admit things back then. It was a different time period. So Kate said her father, Stuart, that was Maud's son, that he found a suicide note his mother had written. It was at Maud's bedside, and part of it reportedly read, quote, "I have lost my mind by spells, and I do not dare to think what I may do in those spells. May God forgive me, and I hope everyone else will forgive me, even if they cannot understand. My position is too awful to endure, and nobody realizes it. What an end to a life in which I tried always to do my best." Now, however, the granddaughter had not seen that note herself, and others think that Maud definitely was in a terrible state. She was so psychologically distressed. You could tell that from her journal entries from months before this. But they think that the overdose was not intentional because, again, she did have that addiction. She had that dependency. One woman who thinks it was not intentional was Mary Henlow Rubio, who wrote a biography, and she points out what I just said. Maud had written several journal entries in the months prior to this that had sounded very sad, very dark. She was not in a good place. And she thinks that this note that was found was just the final page of a drafted entry for Maud's 10-volume life book, her series of journals that she had maintained throughout her life. And in fact, she pointed out that the page was dated 2 days before Maud's death, and there was a number on it. It was numbered 176.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
kind of a bit of a mystery still around that. We're not sure, but regardless, let's end on a happy note.
Okay.
118 years after Anne of Green Gables was first published, here we are still talking about the spunky and inspirational Anne Shirley. That book has sold more than 50 million copies and has been translated into at least 36 languages.
Wow.
In all this time, the book has never been out of print in English.
Wow.
It's also been adapted for stage, television, and film. And of course, we've seen a slew of spin-offs and adaptations. The characters and the world that Lucy Maud Montgomery created at Green Gables on Prince Edward Island all those years ago still lives on.
Oh, I love it.
Armchair psychologist.
All right. So, Ashley, for our
Yes.
armchair.
Yes.
I thought I would ask you, circling back to what we said at the very beginning, what are your thoughts about Maud telling her friend that people were never right in saying I was Anne?
I feel like maybe even through all of her writing, now that we know what she was going through in her personal life, that she was writing the ideal life. Like we said it within the episode, but I'm a little more firmly entrenched in that thought now that she was similar to Anne in her escapism, but maybe she didn't think that she had if she was introverted, You've mentioned that during the episode. If she was introverted and she found it hard to open up to people, Anne did not find it hard to open up to people. It was not something that she suffered from, is the opening up.
Right.
So she could have written Anne as a, here's what I wish I was, but it is not me. You know, like the sort of like what I said at the top of it. I don't think that I'm Anne coded, but I would love to be, because I love her personality, and Mark Twain saying she's the most sweetest little heroine since Alice. It's the ideal, and she had the ideal life. So Lucy may have been channeling all of what she wanted her childhood to be, what she wanted her. I mean, Gilbert Blythe, reading him, he is, and seeing him in the miniseries, he's one of the most perfect love interests ever put to fiction. And now you see what her real love life was like. And maybe Gilbert, well, of course she would have written that prior, but it was, this is what I want. This is what I wish I could have.
Yes.
So it sounds like all of her work, The Blue Castle, I'm seeing a little, knowing what The Blue Castle was
You're
about.
seeing the parallels now.
I'm seeing more parallels. So it sounds like her whole fiction life was what she wished life could be.
I have not read everything like you have, but my assumption aligns perfectly with what you're saying. I think that she based so much of what she wrote on her own experiences, on things that she'd encountered. It's like that, like we've said so many times, a lot of people who write fiction start with what they know and then they fictionalize it from there.
Yeah.
But she seemed to really hang pretty true to a lot of events and a lot of different circumstances from her own life. But as you said, I think this was her way of controlling it. I wasn't able to have a father who showed me love and stayed around me, or a grandfather that seemed to love and respect me.
But Matthew will.
But I can, in my book, he will. And I can control
And
this.
I may have a domineering, strict mother figure, but in my book, she's going to
love me, and she's
gonna
going to soften because of me. I have nothing to base this on except my own impressions.
Well, we are in the armchair.
Right. And so I'm going to say it anyway. I feel like hearing so many of Maud's journal entries, I do think that she thought, and I feel like, so much of who she was, I think, is very close to Anne. Some of those insights and her beliefs and her love of nature and her imagination. I feel like she really was very close to Anne in her thinking. I think she was not in her circumstances.
Yeah.
So, goodness. I figured that might be a little bit of a sad ending. Again, I'm going to turn this and make sure that we end on a happy note.
Please do.
I ran across an article that simply listed some of Anne Shirley's best quotes according to the opinion of the writer of that article. And so I'm going to share 3 quotes that they just struck me. They're the 3 that I chose out of that list. All right. Here we go. Kindred spirits are not so scarce as I used to think. It's splendid to find out there are so many of them in the world.
Kindred spirits. That has to be what Anne is most known for saying, is kindred spirits.
Here we go. Number 2. Because when you are imagining, you might as well imagine something worthwhile.
Boy, that sounds like Lucy's Maud's
philosophy.
Philosophy.
Yeah. Last one. Dear old world, she murmured, you are very lovely, and I am glad to be alive in you.
Beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful? Well, with that, I think that we owe Lucy Maud Montgomery a big cheers.
Cheers to you, you kindred spirit.
Cheers. If you love what we do, please rate and review our show, or become a supporter through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Whether a single gift or recurring monthly donation, your support is what allows us to keep the tea brewing.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Show notes are available at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, where you can also access the merch store and more.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown,
that's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reeve, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.